Welcome to Liberty Voice USA, the channel dedicated to cutting through the noise of mainstream spin and delivering the unfiltered truth about American politics. In a nation where power often hides behind carefully crafted narratives, we stand for facts, accountability, and the raw reality of what's happening in our halls of justice and government. Today, we dive into a story that has sent shockwaves through Washington, a moment in a federal courtroom where Attorney General Pam Bondi faced a devastating revelation from the bench, exposing cracks in the Justice Department's aggressive pursuits that many are calling politically motivated. It began in a packed federal courtroom in South Carolina, where U.S. District Judge Cameron McGowan Currie presided over a high-profile case tied to the Trump administration's efforts to prosecute figures from the previous era. The indictments in question targeted former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James, cases that the Justice Department, under Pam Bondi's leadership, had pushed forward as examples of restoring accountability after what they described as years of weaponization against conservatives. Bondi herself had publicly championed these prosecutions, framing them as necessary corrections to a biased system. But on that November day in 2025, the judge's ruling landed like a thunderbolt, dismantling the foundation of those cases on procedural grounds that struck at the heart of the DOJ's authority.
Johnson's background as a constitutional lawyer should have equipped him for the question. Yet in that moment, his response revealed something deeper, a pattern of selective interpretation. He spoke about defending democracy, but his record, especially his actions surrounding the 2020 election, tells another story. As one of the key architects behind efforts to challenge legitimate electoral votes, Johnson has often walked a line between faith-driven rhetoric and legally questionable conduct. Crockett's question forced him into that uncomfortable space, where moral justification meets constitutional contradiction. Observers in the room noticed the shift. The speaker's usual confidence wavered. The moment wasn't about humiliation, it was about exposure. Crockett didn't grandstand, she didn't interrupt, she simply waited. And in that silence, the illusion of moral authority began to crack. Political analysts later described the exchange as a masterclass in congressional accountability, not because it was loud, but because it was quiet and controlled. Crockett's calm demeanor created a contrast that magnified the speaker's evasiveness. It's a tactic rooted in legal discipline, the art of letting the question do the work. The broader significance of this moment reaches beyond a single hearing. It reflects a growing frustration among Americans, Democrats, Republicans, and independents alike, who are tired of watching leaders evade responsibility under the guise of party loyalty. The exchange reminded many viewers that truth doesn't need to shout, it only needs space to breathe. For months, Mike Johnson has walked a tightrope between two competing realities. On one side, a base still devoted to the narrative of a stolen election. On the other, a constitutional duty to protect the very system that disproves that claim. Crockett's question forced those two realities to collide, and when they did, the result was silence, because there was no credible bridge between them.
That's what makes this moment more than just a viral clip. It's a mirror held up to the broader condition of American politics, where belief often outweighs evidence and loyalty outweighs logic. Crockett's composure reminded viewers that courage in politics isn't about volume, it's about precision, persistence, and an unwavering commitment to truth. In the days following the hearing, pundits on both sides tried to spin the event. Some accused Crockett of grandstanding. Others praised her for exposing what they saw as institutional hypocrisy. But beneath the commentary lies a simple fact. Accountability should never be seen as partisan. When elected officials are asked direct questions about their actions, the public deserves direct answers. Anything less undermines the foundation of democracy. Crockett's rise in Congress has been marked by moments like this, where she turns what seems like a routine exchange into a moral crossroads. Her approach is not rooted in anger, but in clarity, something increasingly rare in a political culture fueled by noise. She understands that every word spoken in that chamber carries weight, and that truth, when delivered calmly, can still cut through the thickest political armor. For Mike Johnson, this exchange was more than an uncomfortable few minutes. It was a reminder that leadership cannot coexist with selective truth. His silence wasn't just personal hesitation. It was symbolic of a broader political paralysis that grips Washington today. A paralysis created when the pursuit of power eclipses the responsibility of service. What Crockett exposed was not just a momentary lapse of judgment, but a pattern where moral conviction is often used as a shield for political convenience. It's a tactic that's been perfected over decades, invoking faith, freedom, and patriotism to justify policies or actions that betray the very meaning of those words. Her question didn't attack Johnson's faith. It illuminated how often faith is invoked to excuse contradiction.
That's the power of a single, well-placed question in politics. It can pierce through rehearsed defenses, scripted talking points, and moral camouflage. It reminds those in power and those watching that accountability is not a partisan weapon, it's a democratic necessity. Even conservative commentators had to acknowledge the impact of the moment. One analyst on a major network admitted, "She asked the question most Americans have been waiting to hear." That's the point. It wasn't just Crockett's question. It was the question of a nation that has grown tired of watching leaders twist constitutional principles into partisan talking points. In the broader narrative of American politics, moments like this don't fade easily. They become reference points. Clips like these circulate not because they are entertaining, but because they are clarifying. They show, in real time, what truth looks like when it collides with evasion. And while the political world will move on, as it always does, the impression remains. Crockett's calm authority contrasted sharply with Johnson's unease, capturing the essence of what accountability should look like. It was less about confrontation and more about revelation. Less about winning an argument and more about exposing a truth that can no longer be ignored. As this story continues to echo across media platforms, one thing becomes clear. The American public is hungry for authenticity. They are no longer satisfied with talking points, press releases, and partisan performances. They want to see real questions met with real answers. Crockett's moment didn't just challenge one politician. It challenged an entire culture of avoidance that has plagued Washington for too long. In the end, it wasn't just a question. It was a test of honesty, of courage, and of leadership. Mike Johnson failed that test, not because he didn't have an answer, but because he couldn't afford to tell the truth. And that's the tragedy of modern politics. When a truth becomes politically inconvenient, silence becomes the strategy. But silence, as history shows, is temporary. The truth always finds its voice, sometimes through a journalist, sometimes through a citizen, and sometimes through a congresswoman who refuses to let power hide behind faith and rhetoric. Jasmine Crockett reminded the country that democracy depends not on the comfort of leaders, but on the courage of those who question them. And that's the essence of this moment, a reminder that every democracy begins to die when questions go unanswered, but it begins to heal when someone has the courage to ask them anyway. Stay tuned, stay aware, and stay truthful. This is Liberty Voice USA, where facts speak louder than politics.